Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. So today, as was requested, I know a few videos ago, but I was planning on getting to it, we're going to be talking about calculation. So stick around, don't click off yet, because if you ever have looked at the board and gone like, what do I do here? How do I come up with a plan? Or you just generally want to be able to make better moves, this video is going to help you a lot. It's the skill that, you'll see people like Hikaru doing this.
Queen b7, knight h1, king there. I don't know.
And you may be wondering, okay, well, how are they able to come up with these plans? How are they able to go like, if I do this, they do this, I do this, like what's their system? How do they get used to it? And obviously a big part of that is practice, which we will be doing some of that today. I'm going to be teaching, at least my method of doing it. You can get some practice and then it's all off to you guys. And you also, this is why I think that this is a good example of just how, certified I am at calculating. If you're not convinced, well, that's rough. Let's get into it. So in my method of calculation, I like to split it into about 3 steps for what you're going to be doing. So, and these are the 3 fundamental steps, and then usually you just repeat steps 2 and 3. So step 1, I touched upon in my previous video, which is figure out what your opponent is doing. So when they make a move, I like to classify 3 types of moves that your opponent can make. The first one is a developing move. A piece is getting moved off of its starting square and it has no inherent purpose behind this. Usually only happens in the opening. Usually you don't need to worry about it. You have developing moves, then you have improving moves. So let's say a knight is here, okay? Maybe an improving move would be to move it to the center to get it to a better spot, bringing pieces to better squares. Those moves, usually, if you can stop them, you will try to, but generally they aren't a huge deal if yours are better. And then the third type is obviously attacking. So here, this, let's say a random move. This is like a really, really basic example, but they are attacking. And all 3 have, a different way of dealing with them. Usually the first 2, you won't have to deal with them. And the third, you have to. You have to deal with their problems. So that's the first step. You have to figure out, okay, why did they play that move? What kind of move is it? Once you've figured it out, then comes step 2. Let's figure out a plan. So a plan usually comes from you weigh a few different moves or just one move, but you weigh a few different moves and goes, okay. And you go, okay, what am I trying to accomplish here? Am I trying to improve a piece? Is something dumb? Do I want to put a rook on an open file, etc., etc., etc.? And I think it's easiest if I show some examples. And the third step is simply figure out their response, and then you'll repeat steps 2 and 3. So let's use one of my games for example, and I'll show you how we would use this process. Okay, so here is a position from one of my over the board games. This is quite a while ago, but it's a very interesting position. So in this position, I had just played rook a c8 and pinning his knight to the queen, and he went here. So now we're going to follow the process. He makes a move. This is obviously type 3. He is quite simply attacking the pawn and getting out of the pin. I was like, okay, very reasonable move. So we have to deal with this. And now I came up with step number 2, which is, okay, let's come up with a plan. And I came up with 3 here. So when you're looking at the position, I'll talk about candidate moves in another video, but you're going to try and find your candidate moves, or like the moves that pop out that you want to further explore. So I organized this. I said, well, the first most obvious one is I can just go here. Stop all the queen pressure and just completely claim this square. The next thought I had was, okay, I can maybe go knight to b6. Knight to b6. So I can go here. Or I can go here, which attacks the queen and the bishop. So these were the moves I had, and I considered knight g4 a bit to attack this. This was an over the board game, so I had plenty of time to consider all these different options. So I'm sitting there, and now comes a step 3, where I like to think of it in a more methodical sense. So we're gonna go, okay, which one do we want to think first? Obviously, in like an online blitz game, you won't have time for this, but this all becomes instinctive really fast. which you'll be able to know what they're doing. You'll instantly identify it, and then it's just deciding between a move or two, usually. Not 4, but in over the board, you try to come up with a lot. So I went for the first option. I said, okay, well, let's look at this move. So if I go knight b6, then I go to step 3. Let's figure out their move. And I was like, okay, I wasn't entirely sure what they would play, but maybe he would try and dislodge my knight, or he would go here to trade off a bishop, or he would take my bishop pair. And all these moves were like, okay, these seem okay, but why I didn't end up playing this move is because I thought, and I'm like, okay, well, if I put my knight in front, that means I can no longer move this pawn. And I would likely want to go to c4. However, I would like to have a lot more support on c4. So then I dismissed this idea because I'm like, okay, after he can just play some normal moves, I'm not sure what my knight's doing there because I think that I can make this better. So I went to the next option in calculating, which is I went here, but I had a problem with this because he had queen b5, which pinned my knight to the queen. So I had calculated knight here, queen b5. I would maybe guard it, and then he could probably put pressure on my knight. And then honestly, I'm like, I don't like that pin very much. It feels like it defends it, but why am I just putting myself in a pin? And so I chose, finally, to go with b5. Point being, it's not the best move, but it's the move that I chose, and just explaining like the thought process. It's a good practical move. I am completely claiming this square, and now my knight is going to go here and here. So again, just going through those 3 steps of the first step, what was their last move? The second step, what are my options? And the third step, you just pick an option and go, okay, how do they respond to this? And then how do I respond to that? And you go to your pretty much limit. So that is my basic form of doing it, and I would like to show you, I'd like to give some 3 practice problems. All that practice something different, and they're going to go from easiest to hardest. Okay? So let's get to the first one. So now this position arises from the modern Benoni. White, having just played f3, solidifies their pawns. This is going to be about a 1400 rated puzzle, I'd say. So anyone below that should have quite a lot of difficulty. And even people around that, if you don't know the opening, you might struggle a tiny bit. So here we're just going to practice step 1. Black responds with knight c7. And now what I want you to do is I want you to pause the video here, and I want you to come up with 2 things. First off, why did black go here? What is the idea behind that move? And you'll get half a point for that. And if you can figure out step 2, how do I deal with that, or do I have to deal with that, then you get the full point. And your hint is there is a reason black just spent 2 moves developing a knight to get it to c7 when it could have gone straight to d7. So pause the video and just take your time. All right, well, if you did your job and paused the video here, I would hope that you would be able to identify that black's plan is to go and expand on the queen side with moves like a6 and b5. So you can get half a point credit if you recognized that the knight is going here and that it's the only play, it can't go anywhere around here, and so the only thing it's doing logically is setting up this. And if you came up with the move a4 as a response to that to stop this plan of a6 b5, you get the full point, and congratulations. This wasn't easy, wasn't meant to be, but this is just a good practice of identifying the idea. Even this one's more subtle behind an opponent's move. So if you didn't get it right, it's completely fine. I'll give you some stuff to work on it. So let's go to the next one. Now here is a warning with this one, okay? This one I'm going to give about an 1800 difficulty, and it is quite difficult, okay? This one took me a few minutes to figure out. It is a quite difficult puzzle, and I love it because it's really going to force you things. Take like 10-20 minutes if you have time. Again, you're going to have unlimited time when you pause, but your goal here is practicing stage 2, finding a plan. Your opponent, doesn't matter what move they play, they don't have any threats on the board. Your goal here is to come up with the best plan in this position. So, and to take note of that, you have to recognize what are white's potential ideas and what kind of plan should we go for? Where is our play, or what is our best option? So again, take a lot of time, and don't be upset if you get this one wrong. It is quite difficult. It is a hard plan to come up with, and it requires a lot of good understanding of the game. So just go and pause here and I'll go wait. Welcome back. So if you managed to note one fact in the position, which is very important when figuring out a plan, you have to figure out, okay, well, what are the details of the position, which is that we have a kind of a subpar bishop, and as you may have noticed, we can't really have play on the queen side because this pawn becomes weak. For example, this would become a major pawn weakness, which can be easily targeted. As for play on the king side, it doesn't look like we have nearly enough to get an attack started, so you have to think, okay, well, what do I do? Well, looks like none of these knights can reasonably jump to the center to do this, and white definitely has some pressure against our king side. So if you manage to come with the correct solution move, g6, kudos to you. This is a very good move, and the point is that you are looking to trade off your bad bishop for his good bishop that is going here. We are looking to go here, which will negate a lot of the threats that he has in the position, which if you identified that this was one and maybe some queenside expansion was another, full credit to you. Difficult one to come up with, but that shows that sometimes in just super empty positions, you just have to really grit and figure out a plan instead of just going, okay, well, I'm just going to play a random move because I don't know what to do. Well, when you don't know what to do, think through it, because there's usually going to be something there. Otherwise, the game would be over. And now let's go to the final one, which I would count as pretty difficult. This one I'm going to consider to be about a 2,000 rated puzzle. The other one is difficult if you have no idea about positional chess or if you simply couldn't figure out what to do. But this one is just going to require purely calculating, This one I would consider to be extremely difficult. And but I believe it is possible if you consider all the options and you really take in the position. I consider it quite possible. Even at lower elos, maybe 1400, I believe you can solve this with enough grit. So white's last move was taking our checking pawn on h2. And now this is the position. Black to play and win. Find the best move. Use everything we've learned so far. Take note of all the details of the position and figure out, okay, and just thoroughly calculate through what's the best way to proceed. So this one could be easier or harder depending on your tactical versus positional understanding of the game. So yeah, just pause it here. Now, as I'm sure many of you considered, this move or other sacrifice of the queen do not work, and there's not much really else to do after thinking for a bit but to go queen h6. This more or less forces mate, and if you found this move, if you saw that it just simply forced mate after something like this, then good job. Very good calculating. I'd say pretty simple tactic if you're good at tactics, but otherwise practicing calculation. So these are all good, but I'm going to have to recommend something if you want to get better at calculation in general, besides just playing games, because obviously it's going to help, but there is actually a website, and that website has helped me a ton with training tactics, and I think it'll help you with your calculation. So that website is called Chess Tempo, and I'll show you real quick. Is Chess Tempo right here. When you go in, all you have to do is go to problems, or I believe it's training, chess tactics. And then once you get here, again, it's called Chess Tempo. Choose your difficulty. I go on hard, and then you start it. And now what is so nice about these puzzles is that, first off, you can't draw arrows. They're very difficult, and you need to just sit there and look at it and calculate all the options thoroughly, and there's so many of them. This is a website used by masters because all the puzzles are difficult for them. It's a way older website, and I promise you it is the best one I have found. It's so much better than chess.com's puzzles because those are just dumb, and you can draw arrows, which makes it a lot easier, but you need to get used to not relying on arrows to calculate. You need to be able to visualize in your head, if I put a piece here, the board changing in your head. So Chess Tempo is the website. I hope you enjoyed today's video or learned something from it, and if you would like me to further explore other concepts in calculation or just chess in general, leave a comment. It lets me get some good ideas for what I can produce out, and it actually helps me